Hi everyone. The Bubb Report is committed to being fearless, balanced, and independent, bringing you the stories that matter most without compromise. Now do us a favor. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. You can also watch us on GBN TV every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Catch us on WPG10 television every Sunday at 8 p.m. Your support helps us to keep journalism free from bias and influence. And together, we can make sure every voice is heard and every fact is verified. Thanks for watching.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, we have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style. And so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
It's a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Hello, everyone, and happy Mother's Day to all mothers in Grenada and the rest of the Caribbean, and of course, Grenadian mothers resident in the diaspora. As we get into this week's program, it would be remiss of me if I did not acknowledge the many mothers who are actually viewers of the Bubb Report. There are many mothers who, on a Sunday morning, are preparing their lunches, they are preparing their meal preps and doing things for the week. Some of them are doing their house chores, their house cleaning activities, while the Bubb Report is playing in the background. So to those mothers, a special happy Mother's Day to you. And we want to thank you sincerely for being a part of the Bubb Report community and family, wherever you are in Grenada, the Caribbean, and in the diaspora. Of course, today is a very, very special day. As we say, the hands that rocks the cradles rule the world. And that is indeed, no truer words could not have been spoken. So again, a happy Mother's Day to all mothers who are viewers of this program. Of course, folks, those of you who are fathers and spouses and husbands at home, let us give moms an opportunity to relax today so that they can really enjoy that special day with you and the rest of their family. So mothers, do have an opportunity to have some self-care and take care of yourselves because you work really hard. The reality is that we have many folks in our communities who also play the role of mothers even when other mothers are not present. And we also want to acknowledge and pay tributes to them as well. As you're coming into the room, please remember to like and share this week's live stream. If you're over on YouTube, just give us that like, hit that like button so that others can have an opportunity to partake of our weekly program, which we really enjoy bringing to you. It's a bit of a solemn week because we will be remembering a colleague of mine, the late and dearly departed Linda Straker, who gave so much to media, communications, and journalism in Grenada. For the first half of the program, we will be paying tributes to her. In the second part of the program, we will be having a follow-up conversation on issues related to the tax on digital services that was passed by way of legislation this week in the Grenada Senate and last week in the lower house of parliament. So we'll be joined by the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Mike Sylvester, who will be coming here to speak to the brass tacks, if you will, of how this particular levy will be implemented on end users of digital services in Grenada. Very, very important conversation. Folks, what we want to do is to begin this week's program by paying tribute to a dearly departed colleague, and we'll be dedicating this week's editorial to the late Linda Straker. The year was 1998, and it was the start of my summer break as an impressionable student of the T.A. Marisha Community College. It was also my first day as a trainee reporter at the Grenadian Voice newspaper at their Melville Street office, upstairs the Grenadian Optical Eye Care Center, that of course is adjacent to or just opposite the NIS building there on Melville Street. I remember that morning vividly, my first orientation meeting with Paula Lewis, who laid out very clear expectations of workplace conduct at the University of the Grenadian Voice. As a novice, I was anxious and uncertain, not knowing what to expect as part of this experience at this newspaper. As I sat in the foyer area of the office, the thunderous voices of Linda Straker and Hilary Williams came bursting through the door. Linda, with her characteristically bright smile, upon seeing a new face at the newspaper, simply said, "Welcome. I hear you're one of our summer trainees. Come, let me show you the ropes," unquote. Later that afternoon, Mr. Leslie Pear came bursting through that very door in his short pants and white shirt. Mr. Pear quipped, "Linda, you have an update on that story from last week?" he shouted, as he motioned his way around the office, doling out instructions to his personal assistant while pouring his classic glass of coffee or cup of coffee from his legendary desk. Now, I didn't know what was about to hit me or how this newspaper was going to shape my future in media, communication, and journalism. But back to Linda. From the time Linda and I met, I maintained a childlike gaze at her reporting processes, from justifying stories to Mr. Pear during our newsroom meetings to following Linda on outside assignments. I remember vividly 2 assignments that I covered with Linda and I covered. One of which was the state visits to Grenada of late President Fidel Castro to the country. Linda was front and center as one of the photojournalists down there at the Maurice Bishop International Airport to cover the welcoming of Fidel Castro to Grenada. The second occasion was Intercall. That was Intercall in 1999, I believe. Of course, that Intercall was held at the Tantine playing field. That was at the time that the old Queen's Park Stadium was demolished, and the Intercall was held at the Tantine playing field for those years that the stadium, of course, it was then called the Queen's Park. The Queen's Park Pavilion was what it was then called, was under construction. And a law enforcement officer, I believe Linda was trying to take photos of one of the Intercall teams. And the law enforcement officer decided it was a good idea to box Linda's camera out of her hand. Well, Linda was not having it. Linda was not having it, and a scuffle ensued between Linda and that law enforcement officer. He was a corporal. I'm not sure if he's still serving in the Royal Grenada Police Force, or even if he remembers that. I'm not sure where he is now. But anyways, Linda defended her honor and defended the press pool that was gathered there, covering the Intercall games that Linda was sent to cover on behalf of the Grenadian Voice newspaper. Linda was not having it. And the point I'm making is she was indeed a very tenacious journalist with respect to covering assignments in the field. Now, Linda, I was also able to understudy how Linda conducted archival research to the way she framed and structured interview questions. The Linda I knew at the Grenadian Voice pursued a dogged tenacity for truth-telling, publishing stories that went outside of the box, even when it offended some in the public. Now, Linda's passing is a great loss to print media in Grenada and in the Caribbean region, as she did the painstaking work that many 21st century journalists who are now armed with the luxury of Google and are now armed with the luxury of AI are either not motivated to do or lack the resources to so pursue. Her interest in professional development was also commendable, as exemplified by the number of journalism grants Linda won, in addition to the number of fellowships she pursued in the interest of developing her craft. Linda, may you rest in peace, and please say hello to our boss, Leslie Pear, on the other side. You will be greatly missed. Folks, we are going to take a quick break and come back for the first segment of our program. But before we do want to share this information from the St. David's for Cuba organizing committee. The St. David's for Cuba group brings together graduates of Cuban universities and friends of Cuba united in solidarity. This initiative forms part of the broader National Grenada for Cuba campaign that goes from the 14th of April to the 14th of May 2026. As part of its efforts, the group will host 2 breakfast sales on May 16th in Redgate and May 23rd at Latance Junction, as well as a raffle to be drawn on the 23rd of May. All proceeds will go towards supporting the people of Cuba. So again, that is the folks in St. David, they're having a St. David's for Cuba initiative, St. David's for Cuba initiative, which is part of a broader national campaign. They will be hosting 2 breakfast sales, one on the 16th of May at Redgate and one on the 23rd of May at Latance Junction, as well as a raffle to be drawn on the 23rd of May. And we will be posting this flyer as well on the Bubb Report social media page so that you have access to it. But folks, what we want to do is to take a quick break and come back for our tribute to Linda Straker. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We just want to make the point that this week's program is actually pre-recorded, as I am away celebrating Mother's Day in Brooklyn, New York. So for those of you who will be attending Rita Gabriel's Mother's Day event, I do hope to see many of your wonderful faces there. And to Rita Gabriel and to all of the folks who attend Rita's event in Brooklyn, we want to say a special happy Mother's Day to you as well. I know that you all are very busy preparing for the event later today. So we'll definitely have an opportunity to celebrate and honor all of the Grenadian mothers in the diaspora. I believe Rita this year is celebrating the nannies, the Grenadian nannies who serve folks in the Brooklyn community there. So we look forward to that as well. So folks, what we want to do now is to go into the first segment of our program on a conversation that we had honoring the late Linda Straker.
Well, thank you, Kellon, for the opportunity. And before I proceed, I would say this research that I did, and from the point of view of a journalist, didn't just happen with me making up a morning and saying I want to do that. Late 2022, early into 2023, I was among one of the Caribbean journalists to participate in a training on immunization, vaccine, and other health matters that was funded by the International Women's Media Foundation. And as a result of participating in this 4-month exercise, those of us who participated, one of the things that was taught to us was grant writing, and I were able to obtain a grant. So it was not like a regular general news story. It had to go very, very in depth, and it took me about 3 months to actually put that together. And during that 3 months, whereas the focus was on the HPV vaccine, there are a lot of side things that you learned along the way that evolved into other stories.
I honestly don't know how to put a lifetime of love into words. My mother, Linda, whose name means beautiful, truly lived up to her name in every possible way. Not just in appearance, but in spirit, in heart, and in the way she loved. Mommy was everything to me. Not a day goes by where we didn't talk, we didn't laugh, gossip. Sometimes we argued, or just shared memes. She was my safe space, my biggest supporter, my comfort, my wisdom. Mommy was my greatest blessing.
Viewers and listeners, as we articulated in the intro of this week's program, we are dedicating the first segment of this week's program in honor of media icon, Grenadian and Caribbean print media icon, the late Linda Straker. Of course, I had the opportunity and the pleasure to work with Linda Straker at the Grenadian Voice newspaper. And for the first segment of our program, we are going to reflect on Linda's life and legacy with colleagues who knew her best. And at this time, I wish to welcome Mr. Peter Richards. Mr. Peter Richards, who is joining us from the Caribbean Media Corporation. Mr. Richards, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. It is not, it doesn't happen regular that we have to come together to pay tribute to a colleague, but here we are paying tribute to the late Linda Straker. So we want to give you an opportunity now to reflect on her contribution to Caribbean media.
Well, how do I start and how do I speak about somebody who, from the time I knew her, in both the irony and the physicality of it all, was bigger than life. Linda, I first came to get to know Linda when I started coming to Grenada at the time when the then Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Mitchell, was in office. And as a member of the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, I would come to Grenada along with Wesley Gibbons, who was at the time the president. I was the vice president, because we always had to be putting out some sort of fire in Grenada media, Grenada government media relationship. And I got to know Linda well. And then later on, Linda came on board the Caribbean Media Corporation, which is based in Barbados. As the editor-in-chief, I was fascinated, if I could say so, by somebody whom, when she sent you a story, there were, at first, there were questions you would ask, simply because I think at the time she was not attuned yet to writing for a regional audience. She still believed that when she say, for example, um, Jack Brown, everybody in the region would know Jack Brown, not realizing that she was writing for the region and not Grenada. And so I had to instill in her, hey, Linda, you know, that's a good story, a fantastic story, but it is spoiled by A, B, C, D, E. And she took it on. She never really sat back and said, well, I wrote the story like some of my correspondents would tell me, well, I wrote the story and that's what they're paying you for, to edit it and what have you. And from that time going forward, I mean, Linda was, if I could say, one of our best correspondents, not because she has died, she has passed, that I am saying that in trying to, want of a better word, as the young people in the Caribbean would say, bigger up or what have you.
Yeah.
And you said that this is not a time when we normally come together to pay tribute to our colleagues, but this is the second person from the Caribbean Media Corporation Network to have passed in recent times. The other person was Ivan Clifford out in Bermuda. And strange enough, I spoke with him 2 days before he died. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. That's just as how Linda hit me, more than a ton of bricks, because before Linda went into hospital, Linda called me and Linda said, Peter, let me tell you something. Don't laugh now. You know her already, and she's smiling and laughing already.
Always jovial. Always jovial.
Yeah, so I said, what are you trying to tell me, Linda? She said, you know, the people tell me I have to lose weight. She said, and they say I have to lose so many pounds and things. And then she jumps in and says, well, the amount of weight they say I have to lose, you know, I'll be smaller than Nicole Best. Well, Nicole used to work with us at CMC. And everybody in Grenada would know Nicole.
Friends. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were best of friends together with Royal Titus and what have you. And we laughed. And I said, Linda, if the people tell you, yeah, lose weight, yeah, lose weight. So there's nothing else you could come and tell me that you don't have to lose weight. Yeah, lose weight. And she said, well, we'll see how it goes. And then before I could say, Linda, what's going on? I'm hearing from Nicole that Linda is in hospital and things are not looking well. And I'm saying, no, oh gosh, no. Linda is a fighter. Linda will be there, you know, because the Sunday before Linda passed, Nicole and myself were laughing and saying, because the week before that, Nicole called and said, Peter, you know, out of the blue, Linda asked me to bring food for her and things. So she's eating now and, you know, things are looking up and things. So I said, well, you know, Nikki, when she comes out from hospital, one of these days we're going to be sitting down and laughing and say, Linda, you remember when you were in hospital, how you asked for food and all that type of thing? And we were laughing and joking. And then Nicole called me 8 o'clock. And, you know, I have this feeling, maybe because everybody would know I'm a St. Lucian and I don't really live in St. Lucia. I live throughout the Caribbean. Now I'm based Barbados and Trinidad. And when I get an early morning call, it is normally something I tense my body for. And she said, I wanted to call you since 6 o'clock, but I just couldn't get it. I just couldn't get it out of my mouth. I just could. And I said, no, that's not true. She said, yes. I said, no, that's not true. She said, I'll call you back. And then I knew it was the worst what we didn't, because Raul had posted on the weekend praying for a miracle. But then, like they say, the man above knows best. And I guess he decided that Raul, Linda would be better served writing from above.
And we are going to be joined by Mr. Raul Titus soon as we await Linda's colleagues up there in St. John's. But Raul, if you are there, we can't see you as yet. But let us talk about Linda's writing style. Again, as I articulated, I worked with Linda. I was a very young and green trainee reporter at the Grenadian Voice newspaper. And, I still remember the very day that I met Linda for the first time. Very uncertain. I'm sure you knew who Leslie Pear was, right? Working with Leslie Pear was one hell of a thing, right? but as a young person in community college back in Grenada, Linda was one of those people who really took me under her belt and really coached me in respect of how to respond to Mr. Pear, first and foremost, but secondly, how to conduct research. And I think for me, that is one of the strengths that Linda brought to journalism in the Caribbean. So could you speak to that?
Precisely. She would send you a story. And sometimes, like I said, initially when she sent me a story as the editor, I would send her back a note and say, Linda, you're not really writing for a Grenadian audience. Please explain what you mean. You know, if I cannot explain, if I can't edit what you send me, I can't put it out simply because, I mean, we'd look stupid. People would ask, what is that about? And then Linda showed me the other side of her, the research side of her. I mean, to the point where I am reading now that Linda probably was the only journalist in Grenada who still made use of the Gazette, the official Gazette. Linda would go and give you background. I mean, things that she was in depth. She was really, really good at her research. Sometimes to the point that I would call her back and say, okay, Linda, I think on that story, you're really overdoing it now. The thing is, you just have to tell me in a line, 2 lines, so you put the story in some form of context so the person in the region could understand what you're talking about. You know, it reminded me of when I used to work with the late Lou Smith out of Radio Antilles, when Lou was my editor in Radio Antilles. And we always had a laughing joke. Lou always used to refer to me as, you boys from the north windwards, that ain't know nothing. Follow us from the south windwards. We are revolutionaries. We could change things around. And every time I got a story from Linda and sometimes to some extent Nicole and all, I used to remember Lou a lot because Lou always used to say, remember, you are not writing for yourself. Don't think people want to read because you're Linda Straker or Peter Richards or no. You have to give people the information. And Linda provided you with that form of info. Politics, I remember a lot that she would complain that some of the politicians, I say, Linda, that's your job. The fact that they don't want to talk to you is because they're afraid of you. If they weren't afraid of you, you know, we have a thing saying in the Caribbean, when a politician tells you, you owe me, you will owe that politician until you die. But I cannot recall any Linda telling me, any politician in Grenada say, you know, I help you out on this one. So you owe me, you have to. No. She was critical. Like I said, when she do, sometimes I used to sit on the press conferences, even with both both Mitchells, prime ministers, and you would hear when she come up to ask questions, you look at the mannerism, some of the prime ministers or some of the ministers, and Linda would go through all her research before asking questions. And I'm saying to myself, maybe that's why these people say, hey, next question. But she was that, and she was always, she don't care whether you turn around and say, you know, and the thing I always told her, and I got that from my peers when I started in journalism. The first thing they said, you are never embarrassed by a question. You're likely to be embarrassed by the answer. And I think that's where Linda took us strength.
That is absolutely profound. And I do want to bring in Linda's dear friend, Raul, dear friend and colleague, Raul. It's I call them the terrific three, not the terrible three.
No. I call them the revolutionary tree.
Or the
It is
revolutionary three.
him,
There you go.
Linda, and Nicole.
And Rawl, yes, and Rawl as
Yeah,
well.
Raul,
Yes,
Nicole, and Linda.
and Linda, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
the
So, Rawl,
revolutionary three.
yes, we are reflecting here on Linda's legacy, and you heard Peter here, and of course you knew Linda in various capacities, both in a social capacity but also in a professional capacity. But I want to begin with you to talk about, and then we'll get to the personal shortly, that very process-driven journalism that Peter spoke to, that I learned about Linda from working at The Voice. And in fact, I will tell you something about that Grenadian Gazette at the Grenadian Voice. We received that subscription there at The Voice, you know, and that is something that Mr. Pear, I think, instilled in Linda, and Linda was able to carry that torch from him in respect of how to find information on issues of national importance to bring to the public role.
Yes, it's
Where do I start? And how do I start?
yeah.
I understand, I know.
You see, the thing is, it's hard even getting to the professional side, even getting out of the personal side to get to the professional side. But I have to do it, and I have to do it for Linda.
Yes.
Linda and I spent a lot of time talking, discussing news, discussing all different types of topic, economic, social issues, media association. We spent like since the Grenadian Voice days, we would spend like hours talking. I remember like when I come back from the gym on a Sunday and I get home, we'd spend like over 2 hours just talking. Politics, economics, and everything. Every current affairs. She was very intellectually stimulating to talk with. And as a matter of fact, Linda, a lot of people don't know it, but I think she also studied, she did law, not like a law degree, but an initial law program. And so that gave her a lot of insight into things. And I always used to say to her, why didn't you finish? Why didn't you go and do your degree? And so on.
Yeah.
But she was that person who was always in local parlance. I always tell her, Linda, you're fast. For example, you know, like we would interact with people and I would be the one who, I don't want to ask you your business. I don't want to, you know, but Linda will come straight out and she will ask you. And as we say in local parlance, she fast. But she was very inquisitive and very much, she wanted to know things. And she knew a lot of things about the politicians and public officials and how things work and how things operate. As a matter of fact, if there were 100 stories that's broken in Grenada in the year, Linda would have broken 90 of them. I kid you not. And many times, I mean, if you reflect, you will see that many of the stories that everybody afraid to touch, Linda broke those stories. Just go through the tapes, just go through the conferences. And many times she has stories sitting on, and she will call me and she will talk and she will say, well, I have this. I said, Linda, why don't you break that story? Why don't you break that story? Because she know I'm the kind of guy who will just, I will break the story.
Go for the jugular role. Yes.
I will go for the jugular. I'm the controversial one. Right? But she is very meticulous. She will say to me, she will always tell people the same thing Raul always telling me. I have the story and I sit on my skin on it and I'm not going with it. Yeah. She will get stories because she's good at networking and source, and she will have stories to go with. And you know what she will do? She will say to me, she holding it. She don't want to compromise her source. She'll wait until the story surfaces from another perspective. For example, if there's a press conference and an issue is raised, she could have a follow-up question, and the story surfaces from another angle, and so she doesn't compromise her source. And that's a good strategy. That's an interesting technique, you know? So that's one of her strategies. She knew a lot of things. She spoke to people at length. This is why almost many of us can actually tell her story, because of how she connected with us. And her role, her advocacy role. I remember when I just came back from England, finishing my masters at City. That was a few years after Peter, because I think Peter did City too. And then Linda raised funds through, was it UNESCO or one of the organizations, to train journalists, and she wrote me in, right? And I think it was a 3-month program, and it gave rise to the Lichelle Murray, the General Andrews, the Eugenia Peters, the Karen Morin, and the list goes on and on. And at the end of the training program, what Linda did, she organized with the media houses for them to get internships. So the internships follow the training. And you see, that's Linda. That's there were many other programs like that she did. We got funds through the Media Association again to train a lot of people, with $40,000 through UNESCO France and so on. And that's the kind of person she was. She was front and foremost. So even when I was president of the Media Association, right, fronting as president, 2 lieutenants that was there doing a lot of the work and making me look good. Well, Peter knows. Nicole, Linda. You understand? Doing a lot of the heavy lifting, doing a lot of the work, doing a lot of organizing for Media Week. We had an exciting Media Week, in terms of the things we used to do, the workshop we used to do, the training opportunities we used to do, the Friday nights we used to do. So it was mixed, and we went on with that for a lot of years, developing it and so on. And the advocacy we placed in terms of getting, and then credit to Michael Bascom too, and then Linda Straker got involved. The 2 things: one, the advocacy and the sessions for our media policy. We got it to the point where it was presented in government on the queue to Parliament, and whoever government, I don't want to get political, but they dropped the ball on it. That was one part of it in which a lot of work was done with Linda, myself, Michael Bascom, and all the others and so on, going back to Father Peter Clark days, right? But that was not accomplished. And the other aspect I want to mention too is her role and her involvement and advocacy in getting T.A. Marisho Community College to introduce an associate degree. Well, you would have known of that, an associate degree in media studies. And many media practitioners participated in it, and some of the media professionals also lectured in some of the programs, like the late Odette Campbell, of course. I think Sherma Wells was a lecturer as well, and so on. So I'm saying all of that to say, her work, the work she has done is just amazing. Yeah. She has the work she has done over the years, working with all these. I think she also did the Imani program. She was one of the trainers training them and so on. So her work speaks for itself. And it's not just media, because, as a parent and as a mother, that's another story altogether, but... It's a blow. It's a serious blow.
It really is. And I just want to bring back Peter here to also reflect on the fact that given Linda's professional development ethos, Linda was, in fact, the very first OECS reporter to be, a correspondent for the Reporters Without Borders.
But that's what I was coming to that.
Peter,
because,
please, yes, so please.
Because I was going to say, as Roald was pointing about all her achievements and all her activities, she also was a person that took on the responsibility of ensuring the rights of journalists. These rights were protected because, as you pointed out, she was the OECS representative on the Reporters Sans Frontières, that's the Reporters Without Frontiers or what have you, without borders. And many times she would call me and say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. They're asking, send me the story on this thing. I just see something out of Jamaica on this. I just see something out of St. Lucia on this. Send me the background, send me what you know about this. And I used to say, with Linda, I have other work doing, but she was persistent to the point of don't forget. Don't forget, And sometimes, even if I forget, both her lieutenants, she had a way of going through her lieutenants. So she would either go through Nicole or she would go through roll, and you'd hear Nicole calling me and saying, "Oh, Linda said, don't forget to send that story she asked you for on this thing." And I said, okay. Let me send it to her right away. As you tell me that, it's still fresh in my mind and that type of thing. Like I said, she was somebody, and her work was also reflected in the Media Institute of the Caribbean, where she did, I think, a series. She did a fantastic feature on COVID and health in Grenada. The impact of COVID, I think, on Grenada, and it was fantastic. It showed her real work as a journalist in terms of research. She went in depth. She was. I mean, I read this. I read the feature and what have you, because Wesley, who is involved in the Media Institute of the Caribbean, said that they were doing these series and they were getting the journalists, in the Caribbean, in the particular countries. And Linda's thing was really fantastic. It stood out. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I mean, her research sometimes, I used to say, Linda, I mean, 1 line, 2 lines, because you're writing now for, especially in my case, a wire, a news agency. So we're not going, when you're home and you're writing Grenadian, so you have pages you could have to fill. In my case, I have to be able to send out stories so Jamaica, Gleaner, and what have you could get it on there. So try and put it quickly, nicely, so I don't have to run through your editing. And she knows when sometimes, as Roll would say, she would sit on a story and she would call me. She'd say, I have this, but I do not know how I want to use it. So I say, send it to me, let me see. And then she would send me the statement and she'd say, but not telling me. First thing I would say, Linda, do you trust that person? She said, yes, that's my source. I say, no, I don't ask you if that's your source. I ask you, do you trust that person? She said, yes. I said, how many times has that person given you something that did not backfire on you? She said, never. I said, okay, we'll go with it. And because, I have to remember, like I said, even before I met Linda and what have you, I used to be coming to Grenada to put out fires between the Grenada government at that time under Dr. Kim Mitchell and the Grenada Media Workers Association, MWAG. And I had a good, close relationship. As Stig would say, because of the free market, I call them revolutionaries. Because of the 3 of them, I came and I addressed the media awards on at least 2 or 3 occasions. So I knew the landscape, if you want to put it that way, very much, very well.
I think you're on mute.
I was muted there. And speaking of outing fires in media in Grenada, there is this perception that, Linda is a sycophant for one side or the other. But I will tell you what I remember about Linda Straker very well, and Raul, probably you were there, and maybe it was you guys and Mr. Leslie Pear that caused me to develop that tenacious courage that I have, especially when it comes to people in power, irrespective of who they are. Raul, I don't know if you remember that Linda led a walkout of a press conference under Dr. Keith Mitchell's new National Party administration. Do you remember that, Raul?
I was in England doing my master's.
Oh, but you do remember that. I'm
But I
not
do
sure
know.
if you remember that.
Yeah, I know about it.
And I can't remember what the context was, but I think the context was that certain officials in the then NNP administration, that was in the early 2000s, they were either stonewalling on information or there were probably some intimidation of journalists happening. And we said that we were going to stand, and I was very young at the time. I was probably only 21. What 21-year-old reporter is going to do that now? But anyways, it was Linda Straker who was part of leading that walkout.
Yeah, I think Odette Campbell, the late Odette Campbell.
The late Odette Campbell was
and
part
I think
of that as
it
well.
was linked, I believe it was linked to the briefcase, issues around the briefcase scandal.
Right, right. Oh, so it was a briefcase issue there.
it was linked around that. Yes.
Yes, and Linda had the courage. Linda and the late Odette Campbell and others. I was actually in that press conference as well. There were some other reporters, but every single reporter, not and every single camera person that was there. Levi Benoit was there as well, the late Levi Benoit as well. And of course, Peter, I'm not sure if you know Levi, but you know Levi was a character in his own right? But the point I'm making is that there was a particular steely resolve that Linda had in the conduct of her journalism. Gentlemen, thoughts?
Right. And just to jump in here, gentlemen, and you see, you call a name, and that's a common denominator here. The great Leslie Pear. You see, because you see, Dr. Bubb, you were a student of Leslie Pear.
Yes.
Linda was a student of Leslie Pear. And he nurtured you guys. And if you just to stay on Leslie Pear for a while, Leslie Pear was one of these journalists who he would criticize Keith Mitchell. But he was a good friend of Keith Mitchell. I've never seen something like this before. And I doubt if you could see something like this in a modern era. Leslie Pear would criticize Keith Mitchell on his issue. Remember, personally speaking, he kept it on issue, not personal. So he would criticize him on whatever he needs to. But he was one of Keith Mitchell's friends. But Leslie Pear was staunch for the independence of the profession. And that's what, I mean, I never got to work with Leslie Pear, but I see how you operate. And I've heard you guys, and so on. So that is what rubbed off on you guys. That is what rubbed off on Linda. So because many times people are speaking, and even when Linda is speaking, you hear the reference. How many times have you heard journalists reference Leslie Pear?
Yeah.
Too many times, you see. Even Hamlet Park is going to reference Leslie Pear because that's the school of Leslie Pear. It's like GBSS and Ashby, Victor Ashby. Yes. How many times you hear all the GBSS students reference Ashby? These guys are institutions. These guys are institutions, and they impact positively people like us. So coming forward now to a situation where you had that conflict, people are going to take a stand. People are going to take a stand on an issue. Right, and I'm coming out of that. I believe that, and we have seen it in the world, that yes, there's this issue of you have to be fair, you have to be accurate, and you have to be balanced. But you can advocate on an issue in the public's interest, which is what Leslie Pear did. You could be an advocate of an issue without necessarily taking a political side. You see, so this is what we see passing on. So I'm not surprised that Odette, who was also a student of Leslie Pear, very close to Leslie Pear as well, yourself, Hamlet Mark, Linda,
Michael
people
Bascom.
around, Michael Bascom, will develop, will be nurtured in such a way to understand that, the media needs to be independent and the media you need to hold the politicians accountable. You need to challenge them. You need to ask tough questions. You need to hold them to the fire. And there's nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, in this modern society, this is becoming difficult. Especially in the social media era.
Yeah, because I always used to tell Linda, hey, you're not doing public relations, so nobody,
No.
If you sit down and you're writing a story and think, when I write my story, I said, Lord, when you send me a story, first thing I look for, is it libelous? Is it, what have you, defamations? So I have, by all means, protect the people that employ me. And as the editor-in-chief, I have to make sure that is. So I used to say, Linda, once you could tell me that this story, and like I said, she would go to Parliament. She would come back and send me a story from Parliament. Some of them I would say, as I keep telling you, somebody would say, Linda, you think somebody's sitting down in Kingston, somebody's sitting down in Georgetown, know where you're talking about, when you just say St. George's.
Northwest, for example.
Or you refer to Peter David, and you don't tell me, you don't put it in some form of context. So, for example, the former foreign affairs minister of this or that, so the people could know he's somebody you just didn't pick out from the bush. And she say, yeah, I have to remember that. You know, I chuckled a lot when I read Hamlet Mark's piece, tribute to Linda. And the headline, where you there? Where? And that used to be, Linda would call me and say, you there? I have something I'll tell you. But I can't write it. I send it to you. I say, okay, send it. And then when she finished, she said, send it back to me when you finish. And when I finished reading Hamlet's piece there, I said, you know, I told him I wrote excellent piece. You captured Linda perfectly well. You know what I mean? The way she would, even when sometimes, I remember the last time I was in Grenada covering the CARICOM summit, and she was there because, I mean, she's our correspondent. And Linda would say, you know, that man don't want to talk. I said, Linda, no. There are ways you could get this fellow to talk to you, though. I say you have to develop a sort of skill that, like I say, many times when I go to a press conference, Linda, I go to a press conference not because I want to know what happened. I go to a press conference because I want a quote, because I already have my story. I know what I go in for. But if you go to a press conference and you go and say, well, what happened inside of there? You know, that type of thing. The man will dance, the person will dance on you. But if you go with a specific thing in mind, whether or not they like it or not, but you are being professional, highly professional, they have to respect you. And that's what I was, I mean, that's what I was in the end. I was very, very, because I know for sure at the last general elections, when I came down to cover the last general elections, I mean, even me passing the Grenada Rush where people said that I came in to do work on behalf of an MP and what have you. And I also, and I used to tell Linda, the only time you ever see people throw stones at green mango, nah. And I tell her, just think about it. You know what I mean? Once you're doing your work, and once you fail to both sides, and once you put in all the sides, people say there are two sides to every story. No, Linda, there are more than two sides to every story. You know what I mean? And if a man tells you, I don't know, don't worry, he knows. You have to find a way to make sure he tells you, whether he tells you in confidence. You know what I mean? So you could run with sources, say, or tell me what, so I could know how to write it. But like I said, I mean, I still, you know, when you're in a shock and you still can't believe. For example, today I was, this morning, Thursday morning, sorry, I was sitting down writing something which I do every month to the correspondents. And I started off by saying, I want all of us to remember Linda. You know what I mean? Just don't say, well, she's gone on to the great beyond. Yes, we all have to go to the great beyond, but remember she was part of the team. You know what I mean? She was part of us. I would call Linda anytime in the night. Or if I can't get Linda, I would call Nicole. Nicole would know where Linda is. Or say, hold on, let me call Raul, and Raul will tell me where Linda is. And I used to say, well, you good? Yes? Literally all.
But Raul, I'm curious. Let's talk about that friendship that the three of you had. You know, because I know that you were not at the Grenadian Voice. So I suspect that relationship blossomed perhaps at the Media Workers Association. Talk to us about that trio, the three of you, that relationship. And of course, let's not also forget the late Trevor Thwaites as well.
Yeah.
You know, when Trevor and Linda were in a room and Raul was in the same room, let me tell you, it was electric, right?
Yeah.
It was absolutely electric. So Raul, let's talk about that.
Yes. Well, my friendship with Nicole goes way back to the IFE. You remember IFE, and they had the IFE radio group.
So they used
I
to
don't
come to
remember
the
that. No, I don't
yeah,
remember that.
IFE
But
radio
yes.
group. They would come to the radio station and record programs and so on, or they do radio programs. That's when Nicole started her media career at IFE and so on. So it began there. Then Linda came into the picture when she started in The Voice, and we would go and cover press conferences. And once there's a news conference, I think that time too I was doing the Caribbean News Agency as well. So once we head into a news conference, it's Linda, we just develop a bond. She's with me. Everybody knows how many vehicles I would have, different vehicles. Linda is always the one in the front seat on the left-hand side. We go in and cover event all across the country. She's with me. I'm the one who dropped her back home and so on. So we developed this relationship, and then coming into the media association, now all of us, we are part of the executive, and we have this bond that we work together regardless of what we have to do. And I think that helped for us to have a good association and do a lot of good programs and so on, that relationship. And then at one point we formed the what you call the freelance panel. Grenada there was this program on an afternoon, a radio talk show that I hosted, and then I brought in Linda and Nicole, and we call ourselves the freelance panel, where we discuss, just about every current affairs issues and so on. And over the years, our children grew and interacted with each other. They're small. Nicole and myself are the parent or are the godparent of Valine. That's Linda's second daughter, Valine. When she was in high school, I think she baptized, and Linda asked us to be godparents, and we gladly accepted that and so on. So the relationship became personal on that level. So normally, if anyone has a function, a family function, we all are there. When my mom had her 80th birthday party a couple of years ago, of course, Linda would be there, Nicole will be there. Just about anything, the only thing for and there was a bit of difference too. I think I was lucky enough to sort of eat my cake and have it in a way in terms of the friendship. So in other words, with Linda now, we can say as much rough jokes as we want. But with Nicole, we have to be careful because Nicole's Sabbath starts on a Friday, So once the Sabbath starts, we know that Nicole is out of the picture. And then based on our religion, the kind of jokes that Linda and I would say, we can't say it with Nicole. So we know the boundaries that existed, and that's what made the relationship dynamic and beautiful. And over the years, it just, we did a lot of things together, went a lot of places together, and it was just, we have a chat, WhatsApp chat with just three of us alone, where we have conversations, just the three of us. A WhatsApp chat we call the freelance panel WhatsApp chat, and we discuss whatever we want to discuss among ourselves, just the three of us. So it has evolved like that, and we've always been friends. We have been to Nicole's house cooking and so on. We saw Nicole's children grow up. We saw Nicole is basically the parent of my children. I'm the parent of Nicole's children. I mean, even today when I'm going through the pictures, and I have a lot of pictures of all of us from over the years, because you see, I always used to be taking pictures covering sports, covering carnival, covering things. So when we go to the beaches, when we go to whatever, I will take these pictures over the years, lots of pictures. I sent Nicole a couple today when when her boys were really small. I think she put it up on her status, and they were like, where these pictures come from? They're surprised, they haven't seen these pictures. But that's the kind of relationship that we have. That's the bond that we developed, the three of us. And whenever I return to Grenada, we always met. So, and when I'm on the highway, driving to work, there are some people that I speak to. My mother, if not Nicole or Linda. And usually sometimes, if I'm speaking to Linda, Nicole is calling. If I'm speaking to Nicole, Linda or my mom is calling, and that sort of thing. So, because we have to, they keep me grounded, and we have to maintain our relationship, and so on. So so that's why when January came, Linda and I spoke in early January, and she had a flu, but we spoke. Then I noticed that when I speak to her again, the flu persisted, and she said, well, because it's almost a week, she said, I'm still fighting up with that flu, right? It didn't register anything. I just remembered it. When February came, I reached out to Linda, I got no response. I said, okay, let the weeks pass by. Around mid-February, I'm texting, emailing, texting messages will not return. That's not like Linda. When February was ending and March started, I started calling. I called the daughters. I said, I'm trying to reach your mother. I called Valine. Valine said she spoke to the mom. The mom said she's not feeling well. When she's feeling better, she will call. I called St. Kitts to speak to the elder daughter, that's Ariel. She said when the mother is feeling better, she said the same thing. The mommy said when she's feeling better, she will call. I started to get worried because that's something is going on. So then when I got to Grenada in March, I called Janelle, I called Nicole, I said, we're going up to Linda's house. I don't know what's going on. So they jumped in the vehicle. We head straight up to Linda's house. I don't know what I was going to meet. When we got there, Linda was outside. She was sitting in the living room. And when I look into Linda's eyes, that's not the Linda I knew. There was something, a distant look in her eyes that scared me. I mean, she talked to her. She was sitting. I didn't see her get up to move. And so I was worried. We talked to her and everything and so on. And I said to her, I'm going back on Monday. Just come with me, because I'm always begging Linda to come to me in New York. I say, I'm going to pay for the ticket. Just come and let's check out, see what's going on with you. She said she has to talk to her daughter or whatever, her children and family and so on. Okay, respect to that. On the way back down, going down, we all were not happy with, we felt she lost weight and so on and so on. And then afterwards, by the time I got back now, picture of Linda, I think she went to the St. John's Clinic, lying on a bed. And then she went back home. And then a couple of days later on, I'm hearing she's hospitalized. And then she's been in the hospital for almost 2 months. And then I'm calling, when I'm speaking to children, Nicole show me her on video. She spoke to me a couple of times. And then she even called me once, about almost 2 weeks ago. My phone rang. I was almost sleeping. 10 o'clock at night, she called and I spoke to her. And she was saying she's feeling better and so on. And she was telling me what's, issues around, how they're treating her and everything. And I was hopeful. I was kind of hopeful. And then we sent down a walker for her. Somebody was here in New York and they were going back. So we sent down a walker because by that time we felt that she would have to get therapy and that she would be able to walk. She never got to use the walker. Things took a turn for the worse, and then it was painful looking at her through the video when Nicole visit every day, the children visiting every day, we calling every day. And even when she just lost everything and she was just lying there, I said, put her on speaker. I want to talk to her. That's when she couldn't respond. But Hazel and Bascom told me, that's Michael's wife, that the last thing that goes is a hearing. Mm-hmm. And they were telling me the doctor say it's a point of no return. That, she cannot, they're just a matter of time now. They gave her dialysis once, they gave her twice again. And the day they have to give her is the day that she died. I think it was a Tuesday they were supposed to give her dialysis. Mm-hmm. So it was a situation where we knew that Linda was going to die. But we were hoping for a miracle. And, reality is reality. But we were praying and hoping, but we knew where this was headed. And it was painstaking watching it unfold in slow motion. Mm-hmm. Because we were there looking on. I was seeing her through the videos because they had to link me. And Nicole would be there every day. The children would be there every day. Ariel flew in again. and it just until the Tuesday morning. I saw my phone. I slept late, and then I saw my phone. I woke up. I saw a joint missed call from Nicole and Ariel, the first daughter, and then I knew. So I called back, and then Nicole didn't have to say anything. I just broke down.
Yeah.
Nicole broke down.
Yeah.
Everybody just broke down. Everybody, it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah.
The whole process, everything, even now, is like she was here with us, you know.
Yeah, Linda and I spoke. I mean, Linda and I spoke, I would say, in early March, too. You know, and again, you know, Peter can reflect on this, but, you know, Linda is one of those people who love giving you leads, you know. Linda would say, you know, I saw the program today, but, you know, here is a lead I think you would be good for you to follow up on. So that, you know, that void is just going to be immense. Really, really immense, gentlemen.
You know, I saw her in the weeks before, just like Raul on video. Nicole was in the hospital. And when I saw her, it reminded me of my son, who was, he had developed Stephen Johnson syndrome, a reaction to medication. And I said, wow. And so, I mean, I was shocked. And Nicole was good enough to cut off the conversation. Because at that time she was, even though she was still moving, there was still movement with her. And Nicole called me afterwards and said, you know, Peter, when you think, I said, Nikki, when I saw what I saw, I couldn't believe it. I mean, you know, you like they tell you, like a soldier, you're trained to look at things, and sometimes things go beyond you. You know what I mean? So
sometimes you're just not prepared.
Yeah, even though you're prepared, you're just
mentally
not for
you think
that.
You are prepared, yeah.
Yeah,
but you're not.
And I said, Nikki, this doesn't look good. And I say, I want to anything. Remember the jovial woman I knew?
Yeah.
The very jovial woman. Reminded me of my sister my sister died in a car accident. And when I reached home, they said, do you want to? I said, no, I don't want to see her. I don't want to see the boy. I just want to remember how jovial, because we were like, just like Raul and Nicole and thing. My sister and myself were like two. Wherever you see one, you see the other.
Pod,
yeah, and the only reason we go apart is because I left St. Lucia. I'd go and work and study outside, and then I never really make St. Lucia back my home, but St. Lucia is home. But you know what I mean? You have that, and I say I want to remember her that way. I don't want to remember her the way I saw her, and you know what I mean, the jovial way, the laughter, that infectious laugh she has. You know what I mean? When she tell you something, she'd call you. I have something to tell you. I have something to tell you. I say, okay, say. I'll call you. You know, like I said, when I saw Hamlet's piece, where you there? I said, exactly this captured her. This captured the woman, you know, that I knew, that I got to know professionally. I mean, and I said, yeah, boy.
Peter, have you ever gotten the one with Linda would call and she would say, I have something to tell you. You're lying down, you're sitting, or you're standing up.
Yeah. Same here.
You got that?
Yeah. And sometimes you would call. And you know, when you're in the throes of something, you know what I mean? I think telling you that, and you say to your mind, no, what the hell?
What did she come
What do you think I'm doing? Hot sun, I work in You asking me if I sitting or standing?
Mm.
And she would laugh.
Mm.
I tell you, the last time we came down for the summit, when I came down for the summit together, as a matter of fact, Kenton Chance, who is now the St. Vincent and the Grenadines ambassador to Taiwan, we normally would have been covering, because he used to work with us at CMC, cameraman and everything. And we would normally be going out on assignments and things together. And then when I sent out the story to say Linda had died, he called me. He said, but Peter, you should have prepared me for that.
Mm.
I said, comrade, to be quite frank, when Nicole called me around 8 o'clock, I was on the desk. I was editing a story. I stopped. And I said, Nikki, I'll talk to you later. She said, what you got to do? I said, I'll talk to you. You know what I mean? Because I was trying to catch myself.
Mm-hmm.
I said, let me just put out the story right away and think. So Nikki said, okay, I stay there. I'll help. She said, you know what I mean? And for the whole day, you know, you're just not yourself. You know it's a reality. You knew what would happen. You know it's going to happen. You know we're born, we must die, and we must move on and what have you. And you say, you know, you just don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you sit down there and you say, or sometimes I see something happening great and I say, shit, let me call Linda. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you realize, damn, or should I like I said, she would say, Peter, you know, especially when she was going, I was giving Nikki the joke. I say, I hope now that they're both in God's hand, both Odette and her, that they don't resume that legal battle. And I could see them laughing and saying, well, boy, you had to come to make sure things continue, you know what I mean? It's the laughter is, like they would say, behind things. And if you know Nicole would tell you that's my favorite phrase, sapudi. It means what to say. Sapudi.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
gentlemen, this is indeed a very, very difficult loss to fathom. You know, and so we just want to again pause for a moment of silence in remembrance of our dearly departed colleague Linda Straker. And may Linda rest in peace, and may her memory and her legacy be a blessing for us all.
Thank
Gentlemen,
you.
Closing comments. Raw. Start with you.
Closing comments. I'm happy that Linda was part of my life. While I was waiting for the program, Callistra and all the others in the church, they call and want to say thanks to Callistra because they know what Linda meant to me. So they clicked the video and allowed me to see what was happening in terms of the drum beatings and the singing and the chanting. And they were really doing a good job giving praise and celebrating Linda. So I was happy to, although I wasn't there physically, but I was happy that thanks to Callistra and all the others, they were able to put me on video so I can see for myself. I hope that her work and would continue. It's a template that I hope we and all the other journalists upcoming would emulate in terms of her passion for training, her passion for research, and her journalism. The other component of her that people do not know is as a parent. And I just want to say too, my heart is in support of the children. She has two daughters and a boy, and people do not know her story in terms of how the way what she paid for them. The first one becoming a pharmacist, and I remember Linda did the research about pharmacy to point that girl in that direction, and look how she is today as one of the top pharmacists. She's working out of St. Kitts area.
Yeah.
I remember when Linda told me, she said, and she passed the course, she did the program, she did the studies, because Linda did the research and she realized that pharmacy pays well, and that it's a field that's needed in Grenada and the region. She did her research, so she pointed her daughter in that direction. And also with her other daughter, that's Varlene, who is also a qualified chef, a qualified nurse. One of her other sons, Arthur, is also a chef, a qualified chef. So Linda did a great job. She built her house. She built that house, and so on. So she provided for them as a single mother, as a single parent, and I'm happy. I mean, and my heart goes out to them. They don't have their mother anymore. That's a super woman. And her grandchild, Yummy, that child was so, listen, and this is one of the reasons maybe she didn't get a chance to visit me in New York, because her scheduling too, because whenever she used travel, she makes sure she paid that surprise visit to Yummy, the daughter of Ariel in St. Kitts, and Yummy was happy. She would send me the video where Linda just shows up. Linda loved that granddaughter. And we always had this inside joke, but it's almost serious now. When she was small, we would say that child was so brilliant that Yummy, mommy, her mom, that's Ariel and myself, we have this joke. We say, she has a higher IQ than Donald Trump. Yeah, and it seems as though that is true. The child was so intelligent, and so on, and that's an inside joke. And so outside of her work as a media practitioner, and I hope of the legacy, and we can do something special so that coming generation and so on will know who Linda Straker is, what she did, the work she did, and have an appreciation for her. And also, I'm happy for her, what she did as a parent and what she has passed down to her daughters. Her daughters and her son, they will do well because she provided for them. And she has been a good friend to us in the media. She has been a good friend to the regional media. She is well known. Her work is well known. And that's what I'm taking consolation for. That's where I'm finding my peace and my consolation in terms of this shocking departure from this earth of my good friend.
In my words, I like I said, sometimes I keep telling people, sometimes I wonder how come I'm a journalist, when you're so easily lost for words.
Too.
Or, I mean, to express things, you figure you should be able to just, at the drop of a hat, say and what have you. People, you normally hear people say there'll never be another like you. Obviously, there'll never be another person like you or what have you. I'm glad that I knew Linda. I got to know Linda well. We had a running joke because she knew how much I love soursop. And she, together with Asha Andal, and there's another one in Grenada, they used to make it a duty to post on Facebook, soursop, and tell me if I want come to Grenada for it. So the other day I used to show them my tree that I have, my son gave me for Father's Day. Who knows, more than 5 years. It ain't growing no way to it, but I'm persisting with it. I mean, I was giving Nikki the joke. I was saying, Nikki, I have a feeling my soursop tree go bare just now. It's a pity now. If it bears, Linda will not be there for me to say, look, I don't need your soursop anymore from Grenada. Hold your thing. I don't need that. I have now. But it is, I mean, I know how close she was with her children and how proud she was, particularly of the one that just came back from Cuba. I mean, like Raul said something. It reminded me of my days when I was growing up, being out, and they're sending me out on assignments. But you could send me to Timbuktu. I have make sure this assignment taking me through St. Lucia, because I have to see my parents, I have to see my brother, and my brother used to have a thing saying, "Well, boy, the prodigal son is home. Kill half the cow. Kill half the cow." So so I know what it means to be able to, when they send you anywhere, to pass, make sure you pass and check home. And you know what I mean? There's nothing more than being home and the type of thing. But I know the children, as Raul said, they had good groundings. They definitely, you could see that. I am glad. She probably, God rest her soul, that her children, she didn't leave her children or wondering what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
They are now professionals in their own way. Mm-hmm. And if they have the mother's trait, we could know going forward, they will be good. They will be good in their profession.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I was glad when Nikki told me that the one that came back from Cuba, her first day at work was work with her mother, who was in the hospital.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, a double barrel, your first day at work, but here is it, your mother is in that hospital. At least they had the good thing to make sure she was with her mother, washed her mother, bless, you know what I mean? And but they always say your mother's love and blessing is the best thing, even though she was unconscious or what have you. She did know, the daughter must have known that the mother was giving her blessings and passing on to her the good things, how to go forward in life, have our own family, have, you know what I mean, be there for one another. You know what I mean? And the family, from what I know, well, the two musketeers will make sure that they don't go out, they don't stray. You know what I mean? So they'll always be part of that family and what have you. And it's hard, but we have to accept the reality, and that's what they say, death, but that's life.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you so much, and we will continue to carry that torch forward. We continue to carry that pen forward, and I believe that that is what Linda would want us to do. So, again, may her soul rest in peace, and may her memory be a blessing. Gentlemen, thank you for appearing on the Bubb Report this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our viewers and listeners, we welcome you back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report as we continue to reflect on the life and legacy of our dearly departed media colleague, print media icon, print media journalist, Linda Straker. And I'm now joined by Mr. Nigel Mathlin of the Now Grenada publication. Mr. Mathlin, welcome. Of course, these are not circumstances that are very pleasant, but I do want you to reflect on your work with Linda and the work that Linda did with the Now Grenada publication. Before that, talk to us about how you got to know Ms. Straker.
Thank you for having me on the program, Dr. Bubb. It's been a tough week, understandably. I actually don't remember exactly when I met Linda. I believe it was at the Grenadian Voice, which she worked at about 30 years ago. So she worked as a journalist with Grenadian Voice at the time. And at that time, I also used to assist Mr. Pear with the layout of the newspaper, especially when he was short-staffed. I think I probably, well, I knew you from school, of course, but
Not
I
from
also,
BBC, but
yes,
we
but I
crossed paths
also
at
knew
the
you,
Voice.
but I also knew you from the Leslie Pear Grenadian Voice days as well.
Yes.
I remember after that, we served together as well as volunteers on the National AIDS Council. So she was the media representative, media liaison, and I also served as a volunteer on the organization at the time. But it seems like there are a few years age difference between Linda and I, not that many, but at the time that I met Linda, I was probably in my teens. So at that time, Linda seemed like this big, big adult, so much older than me. It's only this week when I was reflecting, of course, some of the tributes mentioned her age, and then realized that there's not that many years between us, since we're both adults now. But we always stayed in contact over the many years, and when we decided to start Now Grenada, it didn't take much convincing. She was with us since day one. So she helped build the foundation with me for Now Grenada and is very much part of the DNA. So even though she's not here in body with us, she definitely lives on in the foundation that we built together. And of course, the huge impact that she had on the rest of the media fraternity. And, a lot of the tributes have reflected on her on her professional life, but Linda was very much a family person as well. So, her family was very dear to her, and she spent as much time as she could with them, both here and abroad, because both of her daughters lived abroad recently. One still lives abroad, one recently returned to Grenada. But whenever she had the chance to visit her daughter and her granddaughter, she always took that chance.
Yeah.
So she also has a son as well. I just got back from the prayer service a few minutes ago, actually. So we had a good turnout. The invitation was only circulated to a small group of people this morning, but we had about 50 people turning out, friends, family, media colleagues, people from the community. It was a very touching prayer service.
Talk about Linda's legacy in the context, and of course you said her work is embedded in the DNA of the Now Grenada publication. I remember Linda specifically in the context of her dogged pursuit of truth, her dogged pursuit of a story.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you don't tell a journalist like myself or Linda Straker is no, because those are fighting words.
Mm-hmm.
And so let us talk about, in respect of just how Linda thought about the work that she did in terms of pursuing those stories, again, in ensuring that she was able to satisfy the public's need to know.
Yeah. So Linda was a freelance journalist, but she was quite a prolific one at that. So she wasn't a full-time employee of Now Grenada, but in the 13 years that we worked together, Linda wrote over 3,300 stories for us. And she also worked, she wrote for CMC, did work with Reporters Without Borders. She did work with intellectual property rights, IUCN, I think. There are quite a few different organizations that she worked for. But yeah, Linda was, how would I put it? I mean, the truth was, when you think about Linda's work, it was about the pursuit of truth. And she left no stone unturned. A lot of times when she participated in press conferences, she would ask questions or phrase things in a certain way. And a lot of times she would face criticisms from that, who didn't really understand the context of why those questions were being posed. But, working in the media profession, you would appreciate very well, a lot of times that you have access to information, but you can't report on it because sometimes your sources of information cannot go on record. So a lot of the times when questions were posed, it's because that you need to get somebody in a position of authority to say what it is on record so that you can then report and do some further investigation on it. A lot of people never understood that, and Linda faced a lot of public criticism. But she was, I mean, I would like to say unscathed, but she never really gave it much mind. She just accepted that, you know, it was part of the territory. She wasn't, you know, now we have a lot of social media influencers and people who build a brand around personality and so forth, but it was never about any of that for Linda. So she pursued the truth, as uncomfortable or as unpopular as it was many times, faced criticism for it, but she continued to pursue whatever it is that she needed to. She took whatever opportunity that she had to deepen her knowledge, attending workshops, traveling, conferences, sharing her knowledge, you know, very invested in the governance of MWAG, Media Workers Association of Grenada. She was always very invested in the craft. And it's difficult. It's becoming increasingly difficult to be a journalist because it's not a great paying profession to start with. And the skill set that you need to be, the skill set that you need to have to be a good journalist is very easily translatable into many other high profile and much better paying professions. So, you know, my lawyer, for instance, has told me, you know, when she was much younger, she wanted to be a journalist, and thank goodness she did not pursue that profession. So, but yeah, a lot of people, the skill set that you need to be a journalist, it's very easily translatable into law, because you need to have a understanding of policies and legislation and different things like that. There are a lot of, Linda got many offers for her to leave journalism, I guess hardcore journalism, to become more of a communications consultant, or, you know, and all of those professions are much better paying,
more lucrative. Yeah.
Much more lucrative, and definitely you won't be facing a tenth of the criticism, the public criticism and ridicule that you're faced with, having to pose those difficult questions as a journalist. But Linda was unscathed. She never flinched.
Never. In the spirit of our old boss, Mr. Leslie Pear, you know,
Indeed.
Mr. Leslie Pear also, again, and I think that is built into Linda's and I's DNA. that courage, you know, because he really taught us that. So, Nigel, any closing comments as we close out this segment?
My thoughts are with the family at this time, first and foremost. I mean, Linda was very close to me, and it's also a huge loss for me, personally and professionally. But let us not forget the family in all of this. Again, you know, as I said, I just came back from prayer night. I'm not particularly a religious person, but I was there to support the family. Her first love was for family. We talk about a lot about her love for the profession and professionalism, but her first love was family. And let us always remember, not only the legacy that she left as a professional, but the grieving family that she has left behind to survive her. And let us be sensitive and thoughtful in our utterances. I mean, and this is not just for Linda. Actually, this seems to be just generally, there's been a lot of, sadly,
Toxicity,
there's a
sadly.
lot of toxicity, and there has been a lot of death surrounding us recently as well. But let us always remember that it's human beings that we're talking about. It's not we see people, or we see names fleeting across our screens, but they're not just faceless personalities. They're people with feelings and families and people who love them. So that is what.
And life stories and impacts and
yeah.
Absolutely. Mr. Mathlin, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week.
Thank you for having me.
She possessed an ambassador of peace certification that I always remember hanging on the wall. And she truly lived that life. It fit her personality very well. She believed in kindness, unity, love, and caring for others. And she taught that to all her children. And as amazing as my mother was as a mother, she was even more so dedicated as a grandmother. To her only grandchild, it's my child. She gave pure, intentional, unconditional love. She loved cooking for us. She loved just taking care of us, laughing and spending time together. She made us feel safe. We knew we were loved when Mommy was around. The silence Mommy leaves behind, it's loud. And it's heavy. I already missed the phone calls, the advice, the laugh. Her laugh was infectious. I just simply miss hearing her voice. And I'm so grateful to God that He gave her to me as a mother. Because Mommy is inspirational. She's exceptional. And she truly knew how to love. Mommy, thank you for all the sacrifices you made. Thank you for your prayers, your love, your strength. You're truly beautiful inside and out. And your love will carry us forever. As always, Mommy, I love you.
And as we go to break, folks, we just want to remind you of the St. David's for Cuba initiative. The St. David's for Cuba group brings together graduates of Cuban universities and Friends of Cuba, united in solidarity. This initiative forms part of the broader national Grenada for Cuba campaign, which runs from April 14th to May 14th and beyond. As part of its efforts, the group will host 2 breakfast sales, one on the 16th of May in Redgate, St. David, and one on the 23rd of May at Latante Junction, as well as a raffle to be drawn on the 23rd of May. All proceeds will go toward supporting the people of Cuba. And we do encourage you folks to support this very laudable initiative, this very important initiative by those who studied in Cuba and by those who benefited from a country that has given us so much, but a country that yet has so little. And as we go to break, folks, we also want to remind you that this is the month of mental health awareness. And as part of this month, we are going to share with you as we go to break a video that is called Who Am I? Which deals with depression and distress. That song was written and sang by Serana Mitchell, who is part of the Friends of the Mentally Ill and a mental health advocate in Grenada. So mental health is a very important issue that seriously needs, in my view, much more prioritization and attention in Grenada and the Caribbean, because as we know, mental health continues to be an issue that is stigmatized in our society. So as we go to break, we will be sharing that video from Serana Mitchell. And as you're coming into the room, remember folks, to like and share this week's program.
I'm so overthinking. My mind is a buzzing. I can't sleep. Should I take the leap? Help, oh God, I plead. Who am I? Why am I here? The answer's in here somewhere. Who am I? Why am I here? The answer's in here. It's just not clear. They say it's within, but I can't find a thing. I need peace. When will it cease? Help, oh God, I plead. Who am I? Why am I here? The answer's in here somewhere. Who am I? Why am I here? The answer's in here. It's just not clear. Just wanna live. Just wanna give what's inside. Don't wanna hide anymore. Some say you decide. Shouldn't the great one guide? Am I wrong? Where do I belong? Help, oh Holy One. Who am I? Why am I here? The answer's in here somewhere. Who am I? Why am I here? The answer's in here. It's just not clear.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Viewers and listeners, we welcome you back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report, and we are happy that you can stay with us. We do ask that you like and share this week's live stream, as we are now continuing a conversation that we started last week relative to the digital services tax or the VAT on digital services that was debated in the Grenada Parliament for passage and implementation. Now, as we articulated last week, DSTs or digital services taxes have permeated the trade environment since 2018. But COVID-19 and the Organization for Economic Development's digitization of the economy project, commonly referred to as BEPS 2.0, or base erosion and profit sharing, have accelerated the focus on digital services taxes. So what is the genesis of digital services taxation? Countries have relied on various principles to tax multinationals and to determine the income that is subject to taxation. Historically, most countries have taxed incomes reported by companies in their jurisdictions. But the rise of e-commerce and the digital economy have created new opportunities for firms to avoid taxes and shift profit, weakening the ties between where economic activity occurs and where income is reported. Now, in response, the OECD launched in 2013 coordinated efforts to curb profit sharing and tax competition between countries by implementing a new international tax system. Now, in the context of Grenada, the country has now joined the expanding list of jurisdictions moving to tax cross-border digital services. Now, on the 24th of April 2026, the government introduced the Value-Added Tax Amendment Bill of 2026, extending VAT to digital services consumed in Grenada, including those supplied by non-resident technology firms with no local presence. Now, the legislation follows the now standard what is called deemed supplier approach, where an electronic marketplace controls key elements of the transaction, processing payments, setting terms, enabling delivery, and that will become viable for VAT. Now, this shifts compliance away from fragmented overseas sellers to a smaller number of platform operators. Now, on this week's edition of the program, as I said, we will continue a conversation that we had last week on this issue with the permanent secretary from Grenada's Ministry of Finance, that is Mr. Mike Sylvester, who is joining us to have a conversation on this issue. Mr. Sylvester, welcome, sir, to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bob, and of course, thank you for having me, and good day to all your viewers and listeners. And let me also take this opportunity to wish all the wonderful mothers out there a happy Mother's Day.
Yes, absolutely. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world indeed.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Sylvester, we are continuing a conversation that we started last week here on the program, specific to the digital VAT on digital services or digital tax legislation. For me, sometimes I think as a linguist and as a communicator, it might be a matter of semantics. But going beyond the semantics, I think there might be a specific difference here. So can you square that difference? Is it a tax on digital services, or is it the other way around, a digital service tax?
Well, it's not a digital service tax, and there's an important distinction there.
Yes.
All right. With that VAT on digital services, the base for the tax is very different, right? So in many cases, these countries they tax the revenues of these large corporations, right? So whether it's Microsoft or Amazon and so on. So it's not a VAT, right? It's not a consumption tax, and that's the important distinction. And so you want to be clear that you don't confuse the two, because if you do so, then you can give the impression that there are potential repercussions from implementing a VAT on digital services by these advanced economies and so on, who perhaps would have an issue if you were to tax the profits or the income or the revenues of some of these multinational companies that are resident in their home jurisdiction and sometimes operate in some of these other countries.
So what exactly are we then going to be looking at this in the context of the end user, what the end user does?
Yes.
Can you
So
articulate
it's a
the
VAT.
specifics of that? Yes.
Right. So it's a VAT, and a VAT is a consumption tax, and a VAT is essentially the if you're in Grenada here and you consume goods and services, there's a tax that is applied, a value-added tax that is applied on those goods and services and so on. Of course, there are some exemptions. There are some goods that are and services that are zero rated and so on, and that is basically what applied. So if you don't consume those services, then you don't pay. Right now, there is a need to actually bring equity in this particular situation, because you have some of these companies that are providing services within the jurisdiction here, right? That they are not basically our government is not collecting taxes on those type of services and so on. And basically, in a sense, you're trying to level the playing field, yeah. And so that's one of the reasons why the VAT is being broadened in terms of the base to actually deal with this particular issue.
Let us talk about the genesis of this legislation, because many folks in the tech sector in Grenada, who we intend to have a follow-up conversation with them, but many of them express surprise. Many of them, you know, they utilize things like cloud services and things like that. And many of them were surprised and in many respects caught flat-footed here. So talk about the genesis of the legislation. And I suppose, obviously, you are an administrator here. You are not the policymaker. But what advice did you give to the policymakers in respect of this legislation and why it would be necessary to happen at this time?
Right. So very good question. So Grenada has implemented an ambitious reform program over many years, as you're probably aware, to support economic growth, and in this particular case, in the area of fiscal sustainability and so on. And one of the ways that we do that, of course, is basically by ensuring that we have a stable tax base, right? And that's one of the reason. And of course, I mentioned the other reason, the whole area of equity and trying to ensure that what happens domestically in terms of the services that are provided here, that those services that are provided by foreign companies and so on, that they are as well taxed in Grenada. So basically that is the you have these ambitious reform program. In addition to the fact that, of course, we have to modernize the tax system. A lot of these services and so on, they are evolving and they are becoming more prevalent in Grenada. And of course, if we don't move along with the trends, you may find a situation where the tax base that you have does not fit with the current environment and so on. And so, in a sense, you're not being prudent in terms of how you manage the economy and so on. So that being said, we've had over the many years, we've requested technical assistance from our international partners and so on in terms of how we strengthen our tax system, how we strengthen our expenditure framework. And you would be aware, for example, Grenada is perhaps among the pioneers in a lot of the areas, fiscal resilience or responsibility legislation. We've reformed our entire suite of public finance management legislation. We've done hurricane clauses. We've done many things, right? And in particular, for example, in this particular area, we have had recently government has implemented, for example, the concession regime for EVs and hybrids, basically to move towards the green in the transport sector, if you want to put it in that context. Yeah. And so there are implications there for revenue. So you have a case where many of the consumers in Grenada now are importing hybrids as opposed EVs as opposed to the ICE vehicles or the internal combustion engines and so on. So you see that in terms of the revenues, there's a trend there. So we've asked, for example, our international partners to help review our tax system to see how we can find ways to treat with this particular I don't want to call it a leakage because it's a policy that the government has implemented to sort of drive a particular area. But at the same time, we have to look at how we balance and how we ensure that there is tax neutrality and equality and so on in the tax system. So coming out of that, we've had a lot of TA, a lot of recommendations in terms of how we can strengthen our system and so on. And of course, we as Ministry of Finance, of course, will take these things to the cabinet with respect to how we move forward in terms of what we do and what we do. And of course, cabinet will either reject the recommendations or approve the recommendation. In this particular case, we brought this recommendation to the cabinet last year, and cabinet approved the recommendation to move forward with the expansion of the tax base to include VAT on digital services to, as I said, modernize the tax system to treat with the issue of equity, as I mentioned before, and so on, and the whole issue of fiscal sustainability and that. And in a sense that the VAT should have been implemented since last year, that policy, for reasons and I think it has to do with the aggressive legislative agenda that we've had over the many years. It took longer than we anticipated. In addition to that, we also proposed that measure within the context of our IDA 21 allocation and our arrangement with the World Bank under the Sustainable Development Finance Policy framework in terms of ensuring that we maximize our resource allocation there. Right. So as part of Grenada being a part of IDA or the International Development Association, they have different countries like IBRD, IDA, based on your income level and so on. We fall under IDA. And so we've gotten, for example, for the last cycle, we got about 66 million. We got 66 million US. This cycle, that 21 cycle, which started and basically covers the period 2026 to 2028. We also was allocated 66 million. But there is a potential for us to get an additional 10% if we were to implement some additional reforms to strengthen growth and to strengthen our fiscal responsibility and to build resilience and so on. And so we propose basically one of those reforms. The other reform which we have been pursuing for the longest while is basically the issue of not borrowing on non-concessional terms. So if you go back to 2014 thereabout, we have not borrowed on non-concessional terms. So most of our debts have been from our multilaterals, the IMF, the World Bank, the CDB, and so on and so forth. Where those loans put you in the definition of what these institutions consider concessional, right? In terms of the rate being very low, you have a long grace period and you have a long maturity period. So within that context, this bill came forward. We have to basically meet our targets by the end of June, July. We should be able to actually receive about 45 plus million of that 66 million in terms of being able to secure that. And part of that as well is to help us to put in place what is called a catastrophe deferred drawdown option. I'm not sure if you recall when we had Beryl, the government drew down from the World Bank 20 million US by declaring that we had an emergency and were able to draw down within a few days $20 million to be able to use to deal with disaster. So we are looking to replenish that, and we want to replenish it before the start of the new hurricane season. And so part of that is to be basically treat with the issue of getting the VAT Amendment Act passed and so on. In addition to proving to the World Bank that we have not borrowed on any non-concessional terms from between last year and June of this year.
Okay. Before I proceed, we're just going to pause. Are you on a laptop or are you able to adjust, because there's a lot of headroom? Are you able to adjust the screen downward or?
A lot of headroom?
Yeah, that's, let me see. Hold on. That's much better. Let me just go on a wide frame. Hold on. Let me just make sure that's better. That is much better. Excellent. We have a Russell John here who's joining us.
Russell is our chief corporate communications officer.
Oh, that's yes. The communication person. Okay, all right, no problem. Folks are saying is that, well, they did not get any public outreach from the Ministry of Finance specific to this one, given that, Grenada, of course, as you know, has a burgeoning e-commerce sector. I mean, I think all of us now, e-commerce and the digital economy is very ubiquitous. We can't avoid it. People all shop on Temu and Shein, and they have cloud services and things like that. So I think that was a concern that the folks in the tech sector expressed. What say you to that?
Well, this is a legitimate concern, and usually normally when we do legislation and so on, the process is that we first come up with a policy, and once we have the policy, we'll get cabinet approval on the policy, and then we'll send in developing the policy, for example, we will have consultations on that. Then we'll get the cabinet approval. We will once we get approval, we'll send it drafting instructions to the Ministry of Legal Affairs. They will then prepare the draft. They will send the draft back to us. We will share the draft with our relevant stakeholders. So, for example, this draft, we shared it with the World Bank, we shared it with the OECD, and they provided comments and input into this draft. Yeah. We then provide the draft will then go back to the Legal Affairs, and the Legal Affairs usually they have a period of consultation as well, where they will share, for example, the Bar Association and other stakeholders from their end. I think the issue that we have is the timing constraint that we face with respect to trying to get and ensure that we get this passed so that we can get the catastrophe default drawdown option. We can get that $20 million established and set aside, so that in the case we have a natural disaster before by June, then we can have that in place and so on. So yes, it's a legitimate concern. But what I would say in the context of that, though, and the law is drafted in a certain way that allows the minister to set a commencement date. So the act doesn't, or the bill doesn't come into effect immediately, right? And then there is the transition provision where it allows for 6 months for a lot of the administrative and PR and other work and education and so on to happen. So there is that window there as well, right? And so I think we do understand it's a legitimate concern, as I said, but we had competing interests that we had to work with, and in that particular context.
So what I hear you saying here is that implementing this legislation was incumbent upon having access to that drawdown facility, that natural disaster clause.
The drawdown facility, not the what do you call it?
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Catastrophe default drawdown option.
The catastrophe default drawdown option. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
A contingency line of credit. I think that's a more.
So it was a contingency line of credit. Okay, so you're saying that this was incumbent upon having access to that contingency line of credit was incumbent upon having that legislation in place.
Right, and as well, the fact that we have the top up. So there is that top up that I mentioned. If we were to get the reforms successfully implemented, then we get 10% additional allocation. So basically, we're talking about 10% of $66 million in addition. And then, so in addition to that as well, we are now in fact talking about what is happening with the war and between the US and Iran and so on, and how, for example, we can even tweak that particular thing to allow the government even more flexibility and fiscal space because of how the situation is evolving and so on. But yes, it was contingent upon that, and being able to have that in place and be able to, of course, mobilize additional resources.
So let us get down to brass tacks now with respect to the implementation of this particular levy framework. How will the non-resident, what you call the streaming providers, because I believe in the legislation as I read it, you have two levy measures. You have one for the non-resident, what you call the I believe SaaS providers, and streaming providers. How would that happen in terms of levying them?
Right. Well, I mean, it's basically I'm sure you subscribe to different platforms now, that where you pay.
Yes.
All right. It's basically the same thing. What you will get now is that bill plus the 15% tax, right? When you pay that, the company, the foreign service provider, is then required to remit the 15% to the government. So that's all that happens, right?
Okay.
So these service providers are required to register, and we have a mechanism where they can either do a simple registration, or they can register within the context of the existing old framework, and where they can then go and claim for input VAT and so on.
Okay.
But generally, with the simple registration, you basically just collect and pay. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, so that's what. So you're not the consumer doesn't have to do anything extra. It's just you in the same way that you streaming, you go on Netflix and you download a movie, or you buy a audiobook, or you buy some of these other services and so on that you stream. You basically, the tax will be applied on that by the service providers. You pay through your credit card or your debit card or whatever form that you pay, and then they remit that to the government. And of course, then there is a principle where you will determine whether the service is procured in Grenada, because that's when the issue of the IP address and of course your local address and the other measures and so on will come into place to determine the destination.
So what about the end users? Will there be an additional levy on end users in Grenada, or is that again you are getting information from the service providers? That would be the be all and end all here.
So when there be a levy on the end users, the consumer is the one that pays the tax. So if the consumer is the end user, they are the ones that are paying.
Right. So they will. Okay. So it's just one. So there will not be a situation of double taxation here.
No. There will not be a situation of double taxation at all.
Okay.
And double taxation treaty doesn't apply in the case of VAT. Double taxation treaty applies in the case of corporate income and so on, and those kinds of income. Where if a company is in Grenada here, and they make a profit and you tax the profit here, and then of course in the other jurisdiction they also tax the profit. That's when you have the double taxation treaties and so on to sort of avoid that, or avoid that you don't pay the same tax twice. But in the case of a VAT, remember the VAT here is basically for people who consume the service here.
Right.
Yeah? That's all.
Grenada.
So there's no implications for that.
Let us talk about the companies, the services that will be levied. I suspect we're looking here at if you have a cloud account, for example, if you have an Office 360 subscription,
right.
If you have a Netflix subscription, Hulu, whatever those subscriptions. How do you determine the scope of services to be levied and taxed?
Right. So a simple way to do that is the services that you these are services that you pay for now. Right? It's a simple way to do that. So if by the virtue of you having that your platform now, that you streaming, you're paying for any service, whether it's a YouTube account that you're paying for, you would then the VAT would apply on that, right? Mm-hmm. If you go on your app store and you go to buy a free app, then it's a free app. If you buy a paid app, then you basically have the VAT applicable, and then it requires then, and I say require, quote unquote, the Apple to then collect the VAT and pay to the government. So it doesn't require, for example, if John is a app developer and John sells an app to Apple, then John is the one that is requiring to collect the tax and pay to the government, right? Mm-hmm. So it's basically apps and so on. Like I said, ebooks. You have the cloud things that you have, Zoom accounts, Microsoft Office, and then we have to make a distinction with respect to some of these things, because it applies where you are in some cases where you're a registered business, and that you're registered for VAT, sorry, and that where the reverse charge mechanism comes into place. Yeah. So as a regular consumer, you will be required to pay the VAT if you're paying the VAT now, right? But in terms of the Microsoft Office and so on, the issue there, you have to be registered for VAT to deal with the issue of reverse charge mechanism. And the reverse charge mechanism, essentially what it means is that if say Microsoft or whatever, Google or whatever, they are not registered for VAT, so they're not one of the registered service providers. What it requires is that the company here that is securing the service from that company would have to assess the VAT, self-assess the VAT, and then pay it to the government. But then there is also the issue that the VAT is not a tax on business. So there is also the input mechanism where they will also, when they file the tax, have the input part of it. So in a sense, is a net zero transaction. But that is only the case where, for example, there is what you're paying is or what you're selling or is well, basically the difference between the input and the export, the output VAT is different.
Mm-hmm. So again, absolutely. I think that cleared up a lot of my confusion and the confusion of our audience here. And what we're looking at here really is the different rates according to the different jurisdictions in Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, we see here Grenada with it would be 10%, correct?
No. Grenada is 15%.
15%. Yeah. Sorry, not 10%.
We have the tourism hotels is 10%.
The hotels are 10%. Okay, very well.
Yeah.
Okay. So let us talk about the implementation. Again, I know that you articulated that in the legislation, that it gives you wiggle room in respect of the implementation. What is the timeline for implementation? What is the ministry doing to really inform customers about, subscribers, consumers, digital subscribers and consumers about what that implementation is going to look like?
Right. Well, a very good question. I think the debate and so on and the feedback from the general public, I think that was very, very informative. And so we will want to use that period to treat with a lot of the issues of education and so on. So in that context, I think we want to give ourselves sufficient time to be able to do that work. So I mean, our recommendation would be to the government Minister of Finance to give us some time before the commencement date. Yeah. And then of course that 6-month period will follow from there. But again, that is our recommendation we will make. The government may or may not agree with our recommendation. So that's how I respond to that particular question. But I think this is very important as well, what we're doing here, because I did listen to your program, and I think there were a lot of comments speaking to digital service tax and a lot of things that perhaps were not relevant to what we're trying to do. I guess they were just speaking from I'm not sure they had seen the legislation, but it in a sense,
or even read the legislation. Yeah. Well, yes, and I think that public feedback, I think, would be instructive, especially I suppose for those who operate in the sector as well. But finally, Mr. Sylvester, again, the scope of the e-commerce and the digital economy space, I think we are operating, as I said in the intro, in that context now. Let us talk about some of the potential tax windfalls that can come from or revenue earning potential that can come from digital services, and would there be perhaps in the future, if you're looking at perhaps in the future, any other revenue earning potential from this e-commerce space in which we exist?
Yeah, well, the important question. I mean, the digital economy is becoming. I mean, if you look at it within the context of maybe 10 years ago and how it has evolved, it continually expands. So you may see a lot of changes in terms of services that were whether they were physical, now becoming digital and being implemented or facilitated through a digital platform and so on. So those services will automatically, or not automatically, because it says that the minister has to then in by way of order include any changes to the definition and the list of items and so on. So you will have that. So you have the act evolving. And as we see now, I think the footprint at the moment in terms of revenues is not large. In fact, I mean, our projection is that we will collect about $3 million EC, right? And that is relatively small within the context of our revenues. Yeah. But I think it's forward looking in the sense that, as the economy expands and so on, you're ahead of the curve. You're not waiting and trying to catch up along the road. So I think in that context, we are looking at that. But we do see that over time, the impact will be larger. But for now, it is relatively small in terms of what we will collect in terms of the taxes. And so I think the argument about how we do the cost of living and so on, I don't see that as a major argument, in the sense that these are on-demand services. I don't know how many persons in Grenada have a Netflix accounts, and many of the persons who have, they maybe have it from their relative abroad, right?
They use their relatives' passwords abroad, yes.
so they probably not paying anything, that's another thing. So we have to look at it from that context. Again, you have many of the small businesses and so on who are not registered for VAT. They would not be impacted at all, in the sense that if they don't have to do the reverse charge mechanism. Yeah. That kind of thing.
So the registration is a key component here.
Yeah,
it's a key component. Yeah, sorry, you wanted to add. I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. In respect of the cost of living, I just think people heard VAT and they went with it. Another VAT, especially in the context of these astronomical gas prices that we are experiencing. I think that was the context. But of course, that is a political question that I'm not going to have an administrator answer. Right? So Mr. Sylvester, any closing comments as we close up this segment, sir? And let me thank you. I think you brought some clarity to the specifics of how this will be implemented.
No, let me thank you. I mean, that's what we want to ensure that there is clarity, and there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, I don't want to give the impression that the act is perfect, but I think we don't want to. What's the expression that they use? Let perfection be the enemy of good.
Of good, yes.
There is always the room for amendment, and that is something that we do on a regular basis with laws. You when you see it in actual implementation, you realize there are certain things that you can tweak. So that is not an unusual practice, and so we are prepared to do that, and so we want to encourage the public to work with us in this particular matter. And once the economy is stable and the VAT system, the revenue base is stable and so on, and we are able to do, government is able to do a lot more for the citizens and so on of the country. So in that context, I think the Grenada is doing well in terms of some of the reforms, and while a lot of reforms that government is pushing forward. And I think when you look at relative to some of our peers and so on, I mean, I think we're in a good place in terms of our ability to treat with certain matters. Yeah. I mean, I always tell people I was in the service where all we had was a overdraft facility of $60 million in the bank, right? There was no talk about money and cash and whatever. So So this is what our reforms over the years have helped us to be able to do, and I think it's all good for us to continue to manage the economy well and so on.
Absolutely. Permanent Secretary Sylvester, thank you so much, sir, for appearing on this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you very much, and also enjoy the rest of you.
Yes, absolutely. Viewers and listeners, of course, that was the Permanent Secretary in Grenada's Ministry of Finance breaking down and articulating how the VAT on digital services, specific to how it will be implemented. Of course, this was a follow-up to a program that we did last week. We did indicate that we did reach out to government, who promised that they were going to have someone here this week. And of course, they lived up to their promise in this case. So we want to thank them for doing that. And I hope that with respect to a lot of the questions that our audience had last week, that he was able to answer those. But in addition, they did indicate that now that the legislation, again, it's not fully implemented yet, there is leeway within in the time frame within which it can be implemented. But they did indicate that now that it's passed, they will be proceeding with a series of public education initiatives and consultations on this matter, speaking with those who may have questions and concerns, specific, of course, to those who operate in the tech space in Grenada, and those of us who are subscribers in Grenada as well, who have digital subscriptions and things like that. The ministry indicated that they intend to follow up and really speak to how this will be implemented. So, folks, what we want to do is to take a quick break, and we'll come back for closing comments for this week's program. Hi, everyone. The Bubb Report is committed to being fearless, balanced, and independent, bringing you the stories that matter most without compromise. Now, do us a favor. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. You can also watch us on GBN TV every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Catch us on WPG10 television every Sunday at 8 p.m. Your support helps us to keep journalism free from bias and influence. And together, we can make sure every voice is heard and every fact is verified. Thanks for watching. Viewers and listeners, this brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Bubb Report. We're happy that you were able to join us for this week's program, and we hope to see you next week for yet another installment of the Bubb Report. We'll be back for a full-throated live segment, and we hope to have you on board. See you then. Take care. Have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.